yesterday we harvested another beef, and I feel like the word harvest makes me think of picking vegetables from a garden or something. It's way more involved, way more sacred, and a really fascinating process still to me that most people don't get to participate in. So Lacey and I are going to dive into that today and talk about what that whole process looks like. So this is our second cow that we've harvested. Self-harvested, field harvested.
So one of the goals for having beef in general is to take the middleman out of this process. What we've seen over the last few years during the COVID crunch, of course, there was like this major problem where people couldn't get into the USDA certified butchers. And so they might have had plenty of cows, but they couldn't process them. And that to me was this huge awakening of, oh goodness, we don't have control of our food system.
Yeah. And I mean, we do it's a challenge when you get to large herbivores.
Right. We've had sheep all this time. Yeah, and sheep, you're free to, harvest them anytime you're ready.
It's much easier, much quicker,
right.
A lot less equipment.
It's much more, it's almost exactly the same as if you were hunting and you got a deer.
Yeah, exactly. And, it's interesting. Some of the people in your Facebook comments have been like, yeah, my husband harvests deer and I know, that's a heavy weight. And I do think that, hunting does come with its weight, but
similarities.
Yeah. But when you harvest a cow
that's in your care,
it's like, it's still weighing on me, and I'm kind of just picking up on like even our feeling right now, or overall, is there is a heavy weight that comes with it, and this time was much different because so when we harvest them, we actually go out there with a gun and we shoot them where they are with the herd in the head, and ideally they drop.
It's not like we didn't plan for a better solution. That's what our plan was from the beginning. Our plan was, it's going to live here. It's going to die here. It's going to be like this full circle event to happen in this one place. And we think that that's a part of the regeneration of, connection of, life and death and the blood on that ground where that animal was eating and taking nutrition from. So it's so much like we've thought of all of these elements. And it's not, I think some people might look at it from the outside of, oh, well, they don't know what they're doing. But the intention is there.
Yeah. I think a huge awakening for me was like, it's been a few years ago, but, I was out at my friend's farm, Daniel's, and he was just talking about, these cows live this best life, but then they get loaded up in a truck and spend their last few moments not living their best
traumatized
life. Yeah, because it goes from like getting loaded in the stock trailer to then getting delivered to the butcher where they're like oftentimes held at least 24 hours on concrete,
right?
Which cows don't do well on concrete. They're in a situation where it's spiritually dark. It's a butcher place, a slaughterhouse, so everything's dying there. I don't think that the cows are unaware of that.
Mm-mm.
So there's like this whole darkness, emotional problem, in my opinion.
It's similar to system. I think it's not just it's our healthcare system. I was talking to a friend yesterday about her experience going in to get some transfusions and how systematic it was, and she's kind of just shut in this little room by herself, and then she'd had the experience of having someone an NP come out and give her transfusions in her home, and she was like, the difference is just incredible. And then we started talking about like the family doctor versus, the way that we're set up now where we go into the office and it's clinical and it's sterile and the doctor doesn't learn all of the things about you that he could learn from walking into your home. It's just everything about our lives. And then, I've had 3 home births and 1 birth center birth. And I've talked to a lot of women about their births and what it's like in the hospital versus what it's like in your home or a birth center. It's a very different experience and it changes.
Yeah. It's this path of like
everything.
It's this path of checking out of the traditional systems. And you might not be.
Well, I don't even think they're that traditional. It's only like the last 50 to 75 years that these systems have become the norm.
Maybe the current systems.
The current system.
Yeah. I mean, and it might not be that you're ready to make all those jumps. And I think about even our education. Like, you know, our kids don't know what school is like. They think going to co-op for 4 hours once a week is like exhausting. It's just hilarious to me. Thinking, I was talking with them on the way to their co-op today, and they're just like, it's, you know, they're like trying to jockey their position for their public speaking to be like not first and not last, and it's just giving me all this like remembrance of, you know, that whole education
and
system.
I think too, like, we don't, and this isn't a podcast episode about homeschooling, but I think about learning, and it's one of these, it's this experience in life. I think you're so vulnerable when you're learning. It's like eating. Have you ever thought about eating in front of someone? It's like what the most intimate things you do, and you do it in front of people. And how awkward is that, really, if you think about it?
And it's like one of the major things, though, that like you think about, like all the biblical holidays revolve around food,
right?
For the most part.
And it's supposed to be the spiritual experience,
and like community building. You know, like there's nothing more spiritual or intimate than having a community meal.
Learning, to bring it back, is, I think, the same. It's you're taking something in, and you have to be open to do it. I mean, I know when I'm learning and when I'm not learning, if I'm open or I'm not open, right? Like you can always say like, this is not right. I'm not taking this in. My mind is closed. You know, like, you know, when you are open. Yeah. And I think schools often, at least in my experience, taught me how to put the wall up and then be very careful about when I let that wall down. Yeah. Because you are in this vulnerable position, and it opens you up to, you know, any random person who's in your environment if you're learning. And I think most people have experienced as an adult going to a conference or a place where everyone is there to learn the same thing, and you leave with this energy that you didn't expect when you got there, right? Yeah. So anyway, all of that
bringing it back to beef.
Bringing it back to beef. There's just this intimacy that I think we're afraid of and that we avoid. And I know that that's been a lot of the feedback I've gotten on many of the posts I've made about processing our own meat is I could never do that. Yeah. And, you know, I just know I couldn't. And, you know, there's no judgment really for me about that. I think I am a very hypersensitive person, and it's almost debilitating sometimes. And this experience was heavy and difficult and hard. But it also, I think, teaches me what I am capable of doing and what I require. And, you know, what's sort of a part of my existence is this process.
Well, and I think like I had a few people that asked if they could come out and help. And I kind of did not invite anybody.
And people have, even for my births, there were people who were like doula training or birth photographers and they were like, oh, I'll come pro bono and I'll take pictures at your births. And I am a hard no.
Well, like, I think people want to learn, but for me, like, it's still a very sacred act. Right. And it's not something that we've perfected yet. And I think that's that learning part is like being, 100% transparent. Like the kill did not go how we wanted it to go. And the one before that went less how we wanted it to go. And there's like this learning and, it's part of handling animals is you have to be very responsible for their life and very responsible for how they die. And it's, I think the word is maybe embarrassing when that doesn't go how you expect it to go.
Well, I think that the truth is you can never fully control all the variables. Right. You just can't. And when you add in more people, you're adding in more variables. Right. And so it's just more to try to manage in a situation that's already sort of unmanageable, like it's, you can't control how the animals respond.
It goes to the complexity of nature, right? Like there's just so many things happening when you're out in the field, like this time we had talked about, would we take him to the barn, to the run-in and try and isolate him before we killed him? And, we ultimately decided it would probably be less traumatic to just put him down where he was.
Well, and that's the responsibility of the caretaker of the animal. Right. And so when you invite or have other people come in for that experience, that responsibility, it's a shift of like the person there starts to feel the weight of it, but it's not really their responsibility.
Right.
I don't know. It's a weird, it is definitely a weird, it's like invasive, almost intrusive almost.
I think we could get to a point at some point that we could do something
manage
like that.
all that.
Manage all that. But it would almost be like you would have to have people there just to manage the guest. And it would be like and then it becomes almost like a show, and I don't want it to be a show. It shouldn't be that.
It shouldn't be a show, but at the same time, it shouldn't be hidden. So I think that's, I think about the system now, and everything is behind these cinder block walls everywhere.
Nobody wants to see it.
Nobody wants to see it. And, the closest people see of their food system is usually when they end up behind a hog truck on a country road or a chicken truck, and that's like all they ever really see of the process. And there's just so much more involved than that. And, in those situations, I just imagine how confused those animals must be.
Confused and terrified.
Yeah.
Just the whole thing just seems, scary. So, the kill didn't go exactly right. We did successfully put him down, though. And after we shot him...
It was quick. It
was quick.
Yeah.
It just wasn't as quick as we wanted it to be.
Yeah.
So after we do that, we slit his throat, and because his heart is still pumping, it pumps out the blood really quickly. But what I wasn't expecting, and like that learning moment, was what happened next was that the lead bull of the herd came over and let out this moan. And I think we'll include the clip on here so you can listen to it for a couple of seconds.
I'm so torn on that. It feels like another sort of maybe a little kind of a bit of an invasion of privacy.
Maybe we'll just give a couple of seconds.
Yeah.
But the herd came and they essentially made like a semicircle around this bull that was like having his last like kind of muscle twitches essentially. But it was an amazing thing. I don't know how to describe it. Lacey was crying. I was crying a little bit. But it was just this moment of like, there again, like, is this appropriate? I was thinking like, would it have been better to not make the herd go through that? Or was it better for the herd to be able to have, say their goodbyes to this animal? And then, like Lane was like, well, there goes our trust bank with the herd. And I was like, there is an element of that. Like, well, do they look at us differently now?
Well, Shamish, he's the lead bull, and his call is mournful. If you've ever heard a shofar, it's like a shofar mixed with a bass. Yeah. I don't know. It's like, it's just incredibly unpredictable, and he does it pretty regularly, but he had done it before when we had another cow died of just natural causes. And when he came across that body, and that cow had been dead for some time.
But yeah, it had been kind of off in the pasture by itself. And it was winter time, so we just let them lay where they die.
Yeah, and he came over and found it and did a similar thing.
Yeah.
And so he, I don't know if it's just this particular bull or if this is what they would do in the wild. I know I've heard stories about crows and how they'll do this mourning ceremony, or elephants.
Elephants like do something where they like return to the same spot where ancestors have died like year after year or something. There's something fascinating like that. Yeah.
I think we have a way of disassociating that when we, buy a hamburger off the shelf. We have a way of, I don't want to impose humanness to animals, but I don't want to take it away either. this complex emotional connection that the animals have with one another. And, interestingly, like this is another bull that we were killing because we can't really have two bulls. We can't support two bulls. And, you would think there'd be like some element of competition or like relief, but that was not.
Yeah, and that's what I said to Lacey is I was like, well, maybe this is him like celebrating he's king now, but he was already clearly head bull.
Oh, he was that was not my intuition on the experience, and it was more than just singing. He was kind of dancing around and he was pawing at the ground in a like that traditional mad bull way.
It felt very mournful.
Yes.
But it was, I agree with not like anamorphizing it.
Yeah.
But there was definitely an element of some kind of spiritual connection that the entire herd had. I mean, they all came up, sniffed him, were there. It was an amazing experience. And I think it just added another element to the whole thing and something to really contemplate, like I said, of like, is it appropriate to kill one of them in front of everybody or not? And it's something that I think we have to kind of take into consideration next. I mean, it's just so much different. Like, broilers, you're slaughtering them and there's literally like, if there's ones out, they're out eating the blood and the leftover bits of the ones you just killed. And it's just not like that with
and the
cows.
Experience too, I think, was like something out of a nature show. When you watch a lion on a show kill an animal, then I think that you see the other animals of a herd like come back around and and watch. And I don't know, it just was much more like the complete experience is what it felt like. And not that it was good and it wasn't bad either. It just felt like we were part of something much bigger and also fully natural. So I don't know.
Yeah, it was just like, it had me thinking again of like, even when you're raising the best beef, but you pack it up and you put that weight on somebody else. And, I understand you can't always do it this way, but I've been wrestling with the idea of you can't always do it this way, but maybe it's because there's so many people that aren't willing to take on that weight. Like it's a little bit different. Like if you're trying to supply all the beef for all of Greensboro, that's different than if every other person in Greensboro was supplying their own beef. I don't know. If everybody was taking that responsibility, taking that weight equally instead of putting it on certain people. Like I've heard that slaughterhouse people like have a lot of mental struggles because of the weight of their job. And I think conditions aren't that well. And, there's all kinds of other things that you could get into.
You'd have to really disassociate in that context,
right?
Like from what's happening, you'd have to, just draw kind of build walls around to protect yourself from that.
Right.
To do it once a year or twice a year, that's manageable. And I think it realigns and regrounds you in reality. It's interesting because I got to thinking about the Old Testament, the Torah, that you have these really sort of a lot of killing, right? For the sake of appeasing God.
For offerings,
right?
And such.
As offerings. Yeah. And I've always thought of it as, this is something about the smoke and the smell, and it connects God back down to us. With this experience, I realized that those sacrificial experiences were for humans. It wasn't, I think we think, how could God want us to do that? But I think it's about this experience that you have when you take the life of an animal. It's spiritual. I mean, it just is. There's nothing that there's no real other way to describe it. And this connection is so full, like all the dimensions are involved: sound, touch, smell, even taste, like it's just such a big experience. And there's really no other thing you can do. I think we go out thrill seeking because it's in our nature to expect to have those thrills as a part of our regular life, right? Like we build roller coasters to sort of satiate that we aren't getting from our day to day. But if we eat meat, we should be, right? Like if we're a part of nature, we should be experiencing the fullness of those natural thrills. And it was very much like a similar experience to like riding the roller coaster. Like, no, I don't want to be here. Get me off. I'm at the top of this and this is not what I signed up for when I buckled. But then you come back down and you're like, oh, no, I would do it again.
This steak is delicious.
Yeah. Right.
Well, I'd like to steer in another kind of continuing on. Like, I think another really sacred part of it was just having family there. Like, so we did that. We processed him, which I really like the open air processing. So we had to find a tree limb that was, we're still refining our process after the kill and trying to kill. But we found a tree limb to hang the carcass from, and then we had to hoist it up. And as we hoisted, the tow strap slid down the branch, so then we had to like tie another tow strap to the tractor to like pull it in two different directions, so it wasn't like laying against the tree or breaking the branch. And but the kids were there, most of the kids, some of the kids, and we skinned them out. And we have an 8-year-old, 12-year-old, 15-year-old, and they all got to experience again. They're farm kids, so they've done a lot of chickens and sheep, and
they helped us with the cow last year, so this wasn't their first.
This wasn't their first, but they have questions, and I think they also each have their own way of expressing their emotional connection to the entire process. And it's interesting, like the 8-year-old, he kind of like this time more kind of joked around and wanted to poke stuff, but I remember last year he kind of like had to have a moment where he cried because of it, just like trying to process that. And but they, we let them use the skinning knives, and he was telling me last night, how much he enjoyed that whole process of skinning the cow out. And so yeah, it's just that part, I think, of them being that connected, like as a family. A cow is a massive, and these are smaller cows, like Dexter cows, but I would say from head to hoof, what do you think he was? Maybe like 8 or 9 feet tall?
Yeah, if he had been fully stretched, yeah.
So, I mean, it was like a full body kind of being involved with the entire process and pulling out the organs and looking at the different muscle groups and looking at the muscles that were still twitching, or if you like pulled the tail, like a muscle in the leg went. And so I feel like all of that, like that's like schooling on the next
we're doing
level.
Anatomy, as our homeschool science right now, and it's just so interesting. I was like, oh man, we should dissect something. We should order something to dissect it, and you can order like a baby pig or a frog, or and then I'm like, my kids have dissected so many things over the years. I think it's silly for me to think I'm going to order a worm and we're going to dissect that. Might be cool too, but I'm just saying, we've done that. They've done that again and again. So their experience is pretty real in that way. They've seen it. They know all the parts. And so it's just I don't know. I think life has a way of teaching us if we are living it. And, this more, the way the school does it is a much more like clinical approach. Like, okay, today we're going to learn about this. And in this more, back to the, I don't know, like a more ancient way of living where you participate in all those processes. It's not that you're not learning it. It's not that you're not getting an education. You're just not doing it from a book. You're doing it in living color. Yeah,
I know. And to me, it's like, I want to like start taking, so the last one we did last year, I took the hide and tried to tan the hide, but a cow hide is like insanely hard to tan the way I wanted to do, like a fur on tan. But I think like being able to like create clothes, we have like the socks from our wool of our sheep, but like it feels like a complete waste to not be using that
every piece
leather for something. So it's like that to me is the next level of like, how can we do all of that? And then like the horns from last year, we saved those to do biodynamic preparations. But I think there's more elements to it that we can continue to improve on. But I don't know.
Yeah, it's a heavy process, but we did, there's always the comment, well, you could just eat a more healthful plant-based diet. And I am, not anti that if somebody wants to choose that lifestyle. But from my research, it's actually not more healthful to eat just plants. So, from what I'm reading and what I understand about health and nutrition, animal products are hugely beneficial for us, especially if they're grown and treated in this way, in this holistic way, and they're not full of, antibiotics and hormones and corn and grain and all of that, then you're getting the most healthful nutritional foods that you can get from these animals. Not to mention, I think these experiences are also nutritional on a, much deeper level, maybe inexplicable level.
Well, I think it goes back to that complexity. I mean, there's like a spiritual level of, eating meat that is scared at its last minute to eating meat that died in the field that it spends every day of its life in. I mean, there's got to be a difference.
Well, we watched that special recently about how boys feel very inept, like they just don't have a connection to their own capability. And so they're growing up feeling like they just don't, they don't even know what the point of living is, because they have no hands-on experiences that give them that feeling of, oh, this is what life is about. This is how I can use my own two hands and do this thing. And you do leave that experience and you feel like, okay, I can do this. I know, and that.
I do worry about the generation that just spends all their time on electronics. Like today, like processing that cow was a full body workout, and we're not even done. Like now it's in a cooler, and in 10 days we'll be cutting it up into cuts. But I sit here today and my body is sore. Like my entire body, my muscles are sore from all the work of doing that. And I think that to me, there's a level of like satisfaction from that soreness that I think that a lot of people don't get to experience when you don't have, like going. Well,
young children, I think in particular right now are in a deficit in that way.
Right. Yeah. So. But and so that's a whole lot of heavy stuff to think about. Let us know what you think about it.
Yeah.
Send us an email, send us a DM.
We do have some pictures in our group and
on
our social media. So if you want to check those things out, you can see some of the images, and maybe we'll share a little tidbit of the video in the YouTube recording.
Yeah.
That we took. It is emotional. I'll tell you, if you want to watch it, just be prepared. I don't know if it will translate through the video. But.
Yeah, I don't know either. And if you've got questions, if you're thinking about field harvesting your own and want to know kind of more in depth on the process, shoot us an email, info@theschoolhouselife.com, or send us a DM on all the socials. And please share this episode with somebody that would benefit from it. Thanks for listening.